Good morning. Welcome everybody to NorthStandard. I'm Kate Gillespie, Head of NorthStandard Academy, and it's a pleasure to welcome you this morning to our expert panel where we're going to discuss the electronic chart standard S-100. We will explore this morning the need for this new standard and the process of change from the existing S-57 standards, with a particular focus on crew training and the hardware evolution that may be required. Now, once our expert panel has introduced themselves, I'll begin by asking a few questions that have been asked to NorthStandard by our members, and then I'll turn to any questions that you may have. So please do pop your questions into the Q&A of the Zoom meeting, and then feel free to upvote questions that interest you, and then I will pose those questions to the panel at the end. So let's get started and meet our experts. I'm going to ask them each to introduce themselves. Tom.
Hiya, my name's Tom Mellor. I work for the UK Hydrographic Office as the Head of Technical Partnerships. What that means is I work with ECDIS manufacturers and anyone who wants to use any of the Admiralty products and services within their display systems. But I'm also the head of the IHO's E&C working group, responsible for all of the ECDIS-related standards, whether that's the presentation of the electronic charts, the electronic chart format itself, the validation rules for all of that data, and the encryption and licensing. And with regards to S-100, my role is to look after the security scheme around S-100, looking at how we appoint people into the security scheme and make sure that we keep all of the data secure for transmission over to vessels.
Thank you, Tom. Welcome. Laura.
Hi everyone, my name's Laura Neal. I'm the product lead at Seall. We are a software technology company based in Aberdeen. We've developed a range of navigational products, including our own ECDIS solution. My role is really about making sure all these products keep pace with evolving standards and regulations, like this transition to S-100. So what that really means is I work really closely with our engineering teams and our customers to make sure that both the technology and the people using it are fully aware of what's ahead.
Thank you, Laura, and welcome. Shahjan.
Thank you, Kate. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Shahjan Lucas, Head of Nautical Examiners at MCA. I also co-chair the UK Seafarer Training and Modernization program there. So I joined MCA about a year back. Before that, I've been in education and training sector after a long stint of 18 years out at sea. Thank you.
Thank you, Shahjan, and welcome. John.
Good morning or good evening, depending where you are. I'm John Southam, Loss Prevention Director. Part of the loss prevention team here in NorthStandard. My role within S-100, as with the rest of the team, is to make sure our members understand the things that may affect them in the future. So really it's about information provision and assisting them with their training.
Thanks, John. Welcome.
Thank you.
So we'll start with Tom. Can you, Tom, give us a quick overview for S-100 for those who are new to the topic and briefly tell us why we need to change from S-57 up to S-100?
Thanks, Kate. So S-100 is a new data format that's being developed by the International Hydrographic Organization. As you rightly said, its intention is to eventually replace S-57. It has a much broader base. It describes a lot more hydrographic information than we've ever been able to do before with S-57. And that's not to say that there's something wrong with S-57 and our chart format that we have today. In actual fact, it's been really successful in standardizing the delivery of electronic navigational charts. And we've got over 50 different ECDIS makes and models of system out at sea at the moment that can take a standardized electronic navigational chart. And that is incredible, you know, that standardization process and what we've been able to achieve over the last 20 years. But in order to do that, we had to freeze the IHO standards to allow a period of stability for ECDIS manufacturers. And what that's meant is that actually we've not been able to keep pace with the technological changes that have happened. And there are requirements that ships' crews have now that S-57 can't really cater for. If we need to change anything in the chart format, takes a long time to get software patches made and then upgrade all of those systems out at sea. And because of those limitations, really, with the chart format, it was deemed necessary for the IHO to look at how we could build a much more flexible data standard that would accommodate a lot more different types of data. And this is where S-100 was born out of. It is a very flexible framework for hydrographic offices and other organisations to build what we call product specifications. And these product specifications can really be thought of as effectively data layers that can go into your ECDIS system or your back of bridge system in order to support enhanced navigation and decision making, really, for crews. So S-100 is a much more flexible regime, and as technological changes occur, we can extend the S-100 framework in order to cater for those things without the need to have to reinvent the wheel, if you like.
So it's not that there's anything wrong with S57, it just hasn't kept pace.
No, that's definitely the case. There's nothing wrong with any of the systems that are in use today. It's just simply that the S-100 data layers that are being developed now will afford the mariners a greater situational awareness when they're used in conjunction together, and we can bring lots of different data sets together in one common system in order to get a much richer picture of the environment we're working in.
Thanks, Tom. So, Laura, the change to S-100, what does that mean to you at Seall ECDIS and to other ECDIS manufacturers? What work is going on behind the scenes in order to prepare for the introduction of S-100?
Yeah, it's a big shift. You know, it's more than just a new file format. It's really changing the way that the ECDIS system's going to work for the mariner. So as Tom mentioned, we're moving away from this sort of single data layer of S57 to something that's much more complex and multi-layered. And each of these new data sets have their own requirements that need to be independently addressed, but then also integrated so that they can work together. So for us as a manufacturer, that means going right back to the basic architecture and redesigning how we are processing and managing and displaying this data and being able to do it in real time without compromising performance. So yes, it's a huge undertaking, but it's also an exciting opportunity. S-100 is going to, not be this one-off update. It's going to be something that keeps progressing as the products progress and also new ones are introduced. So in that respect, you've got to keep quite flexible in this type of development space, whilst making sure that you're building your system with the right puzzle pieces and in the right order as well.
And with the end user in mind.
Mm-hmm.
Which brings us to Shahjan, a huge amount of work going behind the background and some potentially quite big changes. And so we have to have the end user in mind, and that brings us to crew training. What is going on at the MCA? I believe that you're already making changes in how you use ECDIS to train our mariners. And so how are you going to involve S-100 into that training programme?
Thank you, Kate. You might have heard of the MCA led the seafarer training and modernization. So MCA did a massive stakeholder engagement involving seafarers, ship owners and operators to look at the training needs. We brought the education partners also into that discussion there, what needs to change and what is the skill set required for the seafarers. So within that work, we looked at deck engineering and ETO training programs, looking at the evolving technology, looking at the automation coming into place, looking at the electronic charts, data series coming into there, and what is the skill set required for the end user there. So among the prominent thing stood out there was data skills, looking at the data, how to use the data effectively to keep themselves safe and the people on board the ship safe, sort of thing. When it comes to ECDIS, we looked at the current ECDIS training there. 1 week ECDIS generic course and type-specific training on that particular ECDIS unit may not be sufficient to use that equipment safely. So we did modernize the units, the modules involved in the academic content, and introduce the introduce the operational level passage plan, bridge watchkeeping, and electronic charts and navigation tides into simulator mode there. So more contextualized training using the real-time equipment to give that additional skills there. So we are working with the hydrographers also, UK Hydrographic Office there, to look at the possibility of bringing electronic charts for training purpose without, increasing the cost of that training as well.
So you're using what they're going to use actually at sea in the training environment in a live way?
In the simulator, yes.
So on top of this, Tom, and apart from the benefits to the hydrographic officers and the data use, can you give us the top 5 benefits you think of a crew and a ship using S-100, thinking particularly of our members and the typical bulker or container vessel?
Yeah, so I think probably the biggest benefit for the crews is going to be improved situational awareness. Now, the products that we're talking about here, primarily at the beginning of the phase, will be the operational layers that are used in monitoring mode. So we've got the S-101 ENC chart, and this is effectively the same as you have with S-57, but there are some subtle differences that make it an enhanced product. For example, the buoyage now will be coloured. So if you're looking out the window and you see a cardinal buoy, black and yellow, and you look back at your chart, that buoy symbol is going to be exactly the same as what you were looking out the window at. So hopefully making that mental connection much easier. We're also looking at how we can improve the display of information like text on the screen. And we now have some attributes within the ENC that allow us to position that textual information to declutter the screen effectively, which means that you can now keep the text turned on at all times rather than having to just turn it on and off. Some of these subtle changes will, I believe, give us the basis upon which all the other benefits come. Now, one of the key data layers for S-100 is gridded bathymetry and tidal water level information. These two data sets can be added together in order to replace the existing bathymetry in your S-101 ENC. And when you do that, we can dynamically alter the safety contour based on the tidal information in that area. So now we have what some people have termed the killer app, really, because this will actually, in safety terms, potentially open up restricted waterways at certain tides and things like that. So for the mariner, it's going to hopefully improve safety. For pilots, they may be able to bring larger ships into ports. For shipping companies, they could potentially load more cargo because they've got access to much higher resolution information, which tells them exactly how much underkill clearance they've got. So there are lots of benefits when you are using all that data together in conjunction. And obviously, once you have access to that higher resolution information, combine that with another layer like the surface current information, you can start to see how that can support just-in-time arrivals. And then you can link that to support for decarbonisation. So if you can know that the restricted port that you've got to get to only has a small tidal window for you to get there at a certain time, there's no point steaming really fast and anchoring. It's just going to cost you money. So you were able to look at that route optimization, potentially steam a little bit slower to the port, save yourself money in terms of not burning that fuel, and support decarbonisation at the same time. So I think the data really has the ability to unlock lots of advantages for shipping companies, ports, and for the mariner himself.
Thanks, Tom. So, John, you're talking to our members all the time. The huge safety benefits and the situational awareness for the crew there are quite obvious, and there are some potentially commercial benefits there as well. Would you agree that they've got some potential to support our members? Yeah,
definitely. To sort of echo what Tom said, we can sort of almost back that up a little bit, not just what the members tell us in their offices and the operations team, but actually what the crews are struggling with a little bit and how S-100 may potentially help with that. So a little over a year and a half ago, members will remember that we launched our ECDIS training assessment, or ETA as it gets called. And been just over 6,000 assessments have been issued on that. So we have quite a broad data set on strengths and weaknesses. And some of the weaknesses in knowledge or gaps in knowledge exist around exactly what Tom's been talking about there. So safety contour use, at the moment you have these set contours on S57, just basically the same as you did on a paper chart. So if your safety contour sits in between that, the fact that it moves to the next one is a bit of a knowledge gap on that particular aspect. So crew-wise, that should be eradicated with the bathymetric data that Tom's already outlined, that it will be exactly what they set it at. So that's a safety thing for that. And of course, that again will open up large parts of water that should reduce the sort of issues that members have or concerns that members may have about getting in and out of safe port, which is great. The installation and updating of ENCs is a bigger issue than we expected it to be for crews and their knowledge gaps in that. S-100 will also assist with that, with more of an automated process to help the members along with that as well. And one of the bigger things that's really been highlighted recently sits in and around that passage planning area. As most of the people listening and here will be aware of, seaworthiness has really sort of comes to the fore with regard to passage planning because of the CMA CGM Libra, which whilst on paper charts, that particular incident was caused by a lack of putting a correction, a T&P notice on the chart. And one of the problems that crews do have is that in the appraisal stage of passage planning, the sheer volume of sources of information that they should be getting together to conduct a safe passage plan, it is hard work for them. And the S-100, because of all the data that sits inside the ECDIS, makes it a bit more of a one-stop shop for the mariner conducting a passage plan, which means it's easier to get that information, which means things should not be missed as easily as they are at the moment. So really, we've seen in claims, again, a lot of groundings, etc., under keel clearance calculations, or the application of the calculation has been problematic. Even myself and Tom have had discussions about how we should be applying that under keel clearance calculation. So unclear and hazy is there's many different opinions. Again, S-100, if used correctly with these data layers, will allow a dynamic under keel clearance calculation for the mariner sat right there and then. So even looking ahead, as Tom said, they'll be able to do that. So we should see, if used correctly, a reduction in issues of groundings, unsafe port claims, and general disputes about getting in and out of port, as well as the safety benefits such as the safety contour, ENC installation and updating. There's still knowledge gaps for crew on display. At the moment, you've got your sort of standard layers, you take them off, you put them on. We often find because of clutter, they take too much off. There's a bit of a lack of understanding of what should be on and what should be off. And as Tom's outlined there, that's been thought of in the new ENCs. We've been able to keep the information on, but like text being able to move so they can declutter the screen whilst keeping the really pertinent stuff there to be seen. So yeah, the things that we know through data are weaknesses in knowledge, and the things that we see in claims, if this new data standard is applied correctly, can have huge benefits both commercially and safety.
Really very, very positive, but I'm sure that when you're out and about with our members, they have some concerns as well. Is there anything that they're particularly worried about with this S-100 coming towards us? Yeah,
definitely. Obviously, S-57, technically, as Tom outlined, there's nothing wrong with it. To be clear, it has been a game changer for navigation when used correctly. That term that I've used several times through there, if used correctly, is very pertinent, I think, both to S-57. I mean, when you think about it, all these weaknesses that we found through the ECDIS training assessment is after nearly 3 decades of use. So clearly, the foundation wasn't as strong as maybe as it should have been with regard to training and information provision. So members have noticed this as well. You know, a lot of our current members' operations team are ex-seafarers themselves. So there is a concern in and around making the same mistakes again. You know, is the training going to be there? I can't just put this stuff on the bridge of my ship and walk away. That's kind of what happened last time, and it hasn't worked out quite as well as it should have done. Not because of a technology problem, but because of a knowledge problem. And, you know, so members have realised that, and that's one of the questions we get asked a lot. What is happening with regard to training for our crews on this? And the other thing is, quite frankly, you know, everybody's running a business, so they are concerned about financial outlay that could come their way if there is a hard switch over to S-100 where they have to change all their ECDIS systems. And sort of the members that want to make that early implementation, which we of course encourage and support to change to S-100, are still also concerned a little bit about those two things. Does that mean I have to spend an awful lot of money on changing all the hardware out? And how do I make sure my crews are capable of using it if I do go for that early implementation? There are other questions, but I would say they're the two sort of commonplace ones across the entire membership.
So we have concerns about the training gap, and we have concerns about cost in technology. So if we take each of those by turn, Laura, you're best placed to answer from ECDIS Seall. What is the reality of having to replace an entire ECDIS system to go from S57 to S100, or will an existing unit be able to cope with the update to S100?
Yeah, hopefully it isn't necessary. It really depends on two things, and that's the age of the hardware that's already on board and how your ECDIS provider has chosen to develop their system. So if the hardware that's on board has got legacy issues and it's reaching its end of life, then yes, it's going to need to be replaced. But if it's fairly modern and your system that goes along with it has been developed with that sort of forward compatibility in mind, then a full replacement shouldn't be necessary. About a year ago, we recertified on the latest North Invent hardware, sort of to prepare for that transition. And yeah, everything that we ship out at the moment will be completely upgradable to S100. And the way we'll do that is by sending out a software patch, which can be done via email to the vessel. So it really doesn't need to be disruptive at all. But of course, it depends. It's really, really important that you contact your provider now and ask them what their plan is for that transition, because then you can be better prepared.
Because I can hear members saying now, so how do I know? How do I know whether my kit is compatible or not compatible? So is there an easy way for them to check? How would they check if they need to make any changes?
In terms of the hardware?
In terms of the hardware.
It's not a one-size-fits-all for a hardware spec, in all honesty. I could give you the i7 core processor and the 8GB RAM information that we use, but it's only really half of the equation. The other half that's just as important is how that software has been developed that's going to go along with it. So for us, we chose to rewrite in SCIA. We previously did WPF, but SCIA, it not only gave us, cross-compatible platform, but it also meant that we have a lot more control over how to manage those things like memory and speed, and also how the symbols are sort of rendered on screen, which makes a big difference when you're dealing with these multiple layers. I think you mentioned, Tom, about that interaction between water levels and the bathymetry layers. That's a great example for us because, well, we've created a little animation so that it runs and you see your water levels rising and falling over the course of your voyage and how that affects your bathymetry. Now, that meant that we had a choice. Do we preload all of this data, or do we load it dynamically because it's time-stamped information? Now, we chose to do it dynamically as the animation runs, but it's that type of decision that makes a huge impact on whether your system is going to be able to cope with S100. So yes, your 8GB RAM hardware that you've currently got on board might work absolutely fine with one S100 application, but it quite easily could really struggle with another. So it's about that handshake between hardware and software that's going to determine it, and the person who's best placed to answer that is your ECDIS provider.
So the moral of the story is contact your manufacturer and find
absolutely.
out. Are you starting to get inquiries at Seall ECDIS?
Yeah, we are. Especially from larger fleets, they want to know what it's going to mean for their systems. I think sometimes S100, when we talk about it, can seem a bit intangible as a concept. And it's far easier to have those conversations with customers and partners when they can physically see the products. So we've been providing our customers and partners with sort of test, like beta release S-100 back of bridge solutions, because obviously it's in this deregulated environment. And we are constantly encouraging them to go and download the trial data sets from the UKHO, load it up and start to get a good feel for how these products are going to look and behave once they become commercially available, which again it's great for us too, because our software gets a good shake before we go through type approval, and we get feedback on that UI design that we've done for it. So yeah, but it's a collaboration, I would say, for S100, and the more we share with each other now, the easier that transition is going to be.
It's great to hear about the feedback on the user interface, having the seafarer centred at this, the end user centre on this, which again pushes us towards crew training, Shahjan. And it's great to hear that the MCA and the UK Seafarer Training Package is starting to think about ECDIS, but our members operate in a global crewing market. Where are we at with STCW and S100, and how are we going to make sure that we have compatibility across the entire world?
Thank you, Kate. Yeah. So within the last HTW, Human Element Training and Certification Working Group within IMO, UK has put all the changes what we have put into syllabus for STCW, the whole world to adopt. So the STCW, the STW subcommittee has agreed that UK template will be used for the comprehensive review. So the comprehensive review is starting now, and the next intersessional working group in February 2026 will have correct items from the UK syllabus to go into the STCW. But as with the 2010 amendments, it took a long time to get into effect there. So we are looking at probably 2031 to complete all these discussions and formulate everything into STCW Table A for the mandatory training. And when it comes to the model course, something, so that probably another 2 years for that. So for the whole world to get the hold onto the modernized training and things like that, it may take about 8 years from now. So that's where UK's training comes into more focus there. So what we have suggested is, okay, these are the findings from our study based on stakeholder engagement and the data what we have within the UK system. This is what is required. So probably based on the S100 series coming into force for the ECDIS, there may be some stopgap requirement there from IMO side anyway. But that is yet to be decided.
It's clear then, John, there is a slight training gap between IMO catching up in potentially 2033. Is there anything that loss prevention and NorthStandard in particular can do to support our members through that stopgap phase? Yeah,
I mean, we've already, through making our ECDIS training assessment, which has been well received by members, one of the other benefits of that was that we formed relationships across the industry with regard to ECDIS, sort of UKHO, Seall ECDIS, MCA. We're all on the same page. We all want the same thing. And that's not just to make the software and make the standard okay, but actually to make it usable. There needs to be an actual benefit at the very end. But what we intend to do is work closely with our new sort of partners in the industry to try and replicate the success of the S57 training that we've done, or assessment that we've done, and start looking at delivering information such as at events like this about S100, and then furthermore seeing how we can progress this into some sort of crew provision training and assessment in the future that we can maybe try and help members with to fill that gap up, to make sure that we're trying to get the benefit that maybe we didn't get at the very first rollout of S57. And hopefully, if everybody can sort of put their heads together, we can come up with something that will help fill that hole for the members.
Thanks, John. Thinking, Tom, about costs, always at the front of everybody's minds. We're running a business here. Have there been any discussions around the pricing of S100 ENCs? Do we need every data layer? Is there a flexible option?
We're at a really early stage, Kate, with all of this. We've moved from very theoretical standards into a period of testing and development, and I think that the cost element is a little too early to say exactly what it's going to look like. What we have been doing is looking at how shipping companies currently purchase their existing E&C services. And we've seen year on year a rise in the fact that shipping companies like pay-as-you-sail services, which is where they get all the data up front effectively for planning purposes, and then only get charged for the information as they sail through it. So my best guess at the moment is that that model will probably be replicated into S-100. So if you bought an S-100 service, you would have all of the data necessary for that voyage, and then you would only be charged as and when you navigated in that area. And this is to make sure, actually, that you have access to all of those data layers in order to derive the biggest benefit. Because if you, for example, only purchase the S-101 and then the S-102, you're not going to get the water level information on top of that. And that's probably the thing that brings it all together and really you can derive the biggest safety benefits, the biggest operational benefits. So we're thinking it's actually the value of S-100 comes in the stack of information. So we probably will end up with flexible models for shipping companies to choose which layers they want if they want to go down that route. But that sort of then detracts a little bit from the whole overall S-100 proposition. And one of the benefits that John talked about there around bringing the navigational publications information and weather information and all of that together in S-100 in a common framework, you only get that benefit if you purchase those, or you have a subscription for those other layers. So I think it's a little too soon to say what the pricing model will be like, but I really think that we need to demonstrate through the testing and everything the value of having all of that together, so that shipping companies and mariners will actually go, okay, it doesn't make sense for me to have one layer. I need to embrace all of it, really.
And I guess that needs to be balanced against the return on investment if we've got all these commercial savings, potentially safety standards coming our way as well. I have a couple of questions that have popped into the chat, but I've got a couple of questions here as well. This last one is for all of you, so we'll go around the panel. In a couple of sentences, what are your organisation's next steps with regards to the S-100 rollout and with regards to the end user and operators? So Laura, what are your next steps?
For us, next steps is making sure that all Seall customers have a S-100 backup bridge solution so that they can, as Tom said, trial and test these data sets and get confident with them before that January 2029 deadline comes along. And then once the final guidance is published, then we'll be going through type approval and getting ECDIS, S-100 ECDIS out to the market, but managing this in this sort of dual data environment of S-57 and S-101. Thank you.
Shahjan, what is the international or the MCA training community doing? What's your next steps?
The one sentence answer would be the training and certification for crew and the vessels fit for purpose to keep the vessel safe, people on board the ship safe, and the seas cleaner. When it comes to pollution prevention, it's not only the water, but also the air pollution. So it's a fit for purpose aspect of training and certification, that is. So what that also means is regular review of the syllabus and things like that. What is the technology, where is the direction of travel there? What is the evolving technology there? Are the people on board the ship fit for that sort of technology use? And also the cost of all these sort of things. So how do we maximize the efficiency of the system to keep the costs down?
Tom, what's your next steps? Where are we at with this enormous project?
So it's not going to be one sentence, I'm afraid. I can't do that, unfortunately. But for me and my team, we're really heavily involved in the trial and testing of these new S-100 ECDIS systems. We've got a joint project with the French Hydrographic Office, SHOM, which we're conducting from Portsmouth and Southampton through the Channel Islands and into St Malo. And the aim is to really get all of those data layers that we've talked about and put them through their paces with crews in order to really extract what are the differences between your existing S57 ECDIS and this new system, and to really bring out the business benefits of why you should make this transition to the new data. Also, really testing its functionality, making sure that it doesn't cause any navigational safety issues when you're using that data together. I think one of the things we haven't probably touched on is the fact that these new S-100 ECDIS systems are what we term dual fuel. So they'll run your S57 charts, but they will also run all of the S-100 data. Now, the only difference here is that you won't be able to display any of those S100 layers over an S57 ENC. So you need to be using an S101 ENC in order to layer up that stack of information that we've talked about. So our project really is all about making sure that that works as we would expect, giving crews a chance to feed back into the process of the development of these fledgling systems, if you like, before they start being rolled out from 2029.
It's great to hear about the extensive testing that's going on, especially with users. John, what are we doing at NorthStandard?
So we're going to continue to develop the relationships across the industry with guys like this that are on the panel. We're going to look closely at how we can assist members with that training gap. Obviously, like I said, we've had quite a lot of success with the ECDIS training assessment, so we'd like to do something along the lines, similar lines for S100 for the members, to give them some confidence that their crews are happy with it. We'd also like to maybe start showing members and their crews some of the actual products and how it can benefit them in the long run. So quite a lot to work on, quite a lot to do, but alongside experts such as this and alongside the industry, we hope to be able to assist members in their understanding, not just theoretical, but I'd like to do something where we can show them something practically as well.
Thank you. I do have a couple of questions from the floor, so brace yourselves. It is very interesting that the first couple that have come up are very training focused, so it's very heartening to hear that this is at the forefront of everybody's minds. So the first couple are, with S100 bringing multiple data layers into ECDIS, how is the industry ensuring that bridge officers can interpret and prioritise this complex information effectively, especially under high pressure conditions? So I think that's a Shahjan and a Tom potentially
Shall I go
question.
First with
yes.
That? Just simply because we talked about a lot of these data layers, and the concern, as you can hear now, is that that may overload mariners and things like that. But the intention isn't really to do that. We talked about S102, the gridded bathymetry, we talked about the water level information. But the manifestation of that information together is really that it alters the safety contour. So we've talked about three different layers, the 101, the 102 and the 104. But you won't see anything. All you'll see is your safety contour moving as the tide goes in and out.
Yeah.
So it's not that that's going to be lots of additional data to get your head around. It's that you need to understand now that actually you can dynamically see the water levels adjusting in your ECDIS system. So there is a shift. It's quite a big shift from an S57 ECDIS that was very static to a new dynamic 3D environment. But again, you also have to realise that this data is probably going to be primarily around the shallow areas, around the ports and approaches. It's not going to be very deep sea potentially, because actually there's no necessity for it in those areas. So I think it's just making sure everyone's aware of the fact that this information isn't necessarily, it's not designed to clutter the screen, it's to actually aid their understanding of the physical environment. And all of the publications information would be there in the background, but it wouldn't be necessarily on the front of bridge system when you're in monitoring mode. So it's designed to support in passage planning and the appraisal stage, not when you're actually underway. So those layers would just not be on the screen at that time. So I don't think people are going to be overloaded, but this is where actually getting it in front of people, like Laura and John has said, you know, and so that they can see it and that allays some of the fears, I think that will really help. You know.
Shahjan, you've mentioned, obviously, all this is going to have to be trained in. You've mentioned the UK's training programme that will potentially be adopted by the IMO. The question here talks about new STCW training modules or type-specific endorsements for manufacturing S-100s. Can you maybe elaborate a little bit more on how we're going to train this? Are we talking about bolt-on one-week courses or more embedding it into the syllabus? What is this going to look like?
So what UK has done is the syllabus has been overall to embed all these new technology coming into the main education training system there for certification. It is the question of, you know, the Seafarer Training and Modernization Working Group discussed, the seafarers must be equally conversant with their ECDIS bridge equipments as they are with their mobile phones, you know. So that sort of expertise are we're looking for. And it's not easy to get it unless they are exposed to it right from the beginning sort of thing. So anybody, you know, if you're exposed to it, you'll pick it up. So that is the ethos of UK training there. So right from, whether it's a cadet or experienced seafarer route, right from the start of the training, these are exposed to them. Therefore, they can learn the equipment, learn the limitations of that equipment, what is the strength of that data coming through, what is the possible accuracy of that data. Therefore, they can use that data effectively to keep themselves safe and the ship safe.
So the days of the chart room with a sea of students in front of paper charts are long gone, and we are in a simulated environment a lot of the time.
Correct.
Thank you. I have a couple of commercial questions that have come through. The first one for John is for you, and I guess this is a question you get from members quite a lot. If members embrace the new technology and embrace all the training, might that get a reduce in premium?
The short answer is not just for fitting it. We expect, if the training comes to fruition and is better than the S-57 rollout, and the crews know how to correctly use, that all the safety benefits that Tom and Laura and Shahjan and myself have discussed this morning will become a reality. And if those safety benefits become a reality, then, you know, the risk of an incident occurring will reduce, and then that will be taken into account at that time. But for simply plugging it in, if it's not used properly or not used at all, then there would be no sort of major benefit for the member.
And I guess that goes to another question that's popped up here, and it's the same sort of answer. Do you foresee other commercial stakeholders, such as charterers, insurers and vetting bodies, starting to look at the data that comes out of this when they're negotiating?
The data that comes out of it.
Safety data, I'm thinking.
Yeah, I suppose, I mean, all of the navigation stuff is looked at by people such as RightShip anyway during their inspections. Our sort of survey team is part of that. You know, and those are used to give ratings. I can't speak for RightShip, obviously, but for us, you know, it would be a benefit for the survey team to see the latest safety equipment on board. So yeah, you know, early, if you take up on this early and start to use it properly, then yeah, I think there are benefits both commercially at that level, which is relatively minor, I suppose. Again, not being able to speak for RightShip, but also commercially, as Tom touched on, with things like decarbonisation, fuel savings and things like that. So yeah, it's not all, whilst we look at it in loss prevention as ex-seafarers as a safety product, there are commercial gains if it's used properly as well.
Interesting. There's an interesting one here, and it goes to regulatory, although not training. And to Tom, it says, having all these multiple layers, will any of these be compulsory in terms of SOLAS or MARPOL, the layers we have to have?
Okay, that's a really good question. And what's happened recently with the IMO performance standard for S-100 ECDIS is they didn't mandate the fact that you had to have certain layers. What they said is that actually, if you incorporate the chart information with publications data, MET information and things like that, it would still be considered carriage compliant. So it's not mandating that these things have to be in place, but it's saying that if you do use them, it would be deemed carriage compliant, carriage of that information. So that's I suppose the nuance really in there. I think actually mandation of certain layers or mandation of the S-100 ECDIS will only come once we have sustained use and can back up the benefits that we've talked about, which are conceptual really at the moment, with hard evidence, and that's only going to come through time and use, I think, and the lived experience really of the seafarer, and that sort of leads on to the question that I get asked the most, really, which is, will we ever see an end to S57? And ECDIS manufacturers have been trying to get the IHO to say exactly when they would turn that off, because at the moment they're having to support S57 in their systems and all of this new S100 data. And it would be much simpler and easier if we had just said no S57 in the S100 ECDIS, but we've termed it dual fuel, and this gives, I think, some time for the smaller hydrographic offices to make the data and transition across. And I think that's the thing we'll need to do, is to demonstrate that we've got complete coverage with S101 before we can start to have those conversations about turning S57 off as well.
Interesting. This one might be for Laura, I'm not sure, but it's really nice to see what people are focusing on here. It says, owing to larger and more frequent data transfers for S100 products, is there a concern for cybersecurity risks?
It's a good question. Your ECDIS is usually offline, so it shouldn't be. But I guess that'll be something that we go through with a fine-tooth comb once that final guidance is published. It's not something we are immediately concerned about.
I could probably add something to that. So the security for your S100 data products is a lot higher than we have for S57. We're using now digital signatures on all the files in order to authenticate the information that's coming through, so that the systems can be assured that the information's come from a proper source, if you like. The other thing that we're doing at the IHO level is to have a new appointment process for anyone who's going to be using the security scheme, and that includes the OEMs, but also the data servers, the organisations that will send the information to the vessels. So we've got new agreements which everyone's having to sign up to, and there are much more stringent methodologies in place to audit those organisations on an annual basis. This didn't happen previously with S57, but it's something that we're doing with S100 to ensure that cybersecurity.
Interesting. I have two more questions, and then you're free. In S57, in some ports, we observed discrepancies between charted depth and the latest local or pilot-provided information. Will S100 help resolve such shortcomings and improve the accuracy and timeliness of depth data?
So, again, I think that is one where we've demonstrated recently that we have the ability to deliver data to ships on a much more frequent basis than we've ever been able to do before. We've broken the weekly delivery cycle of ENC updates and things now to actually deliver them as and when they're ready. And having this capability means that if ports do new surveys, they can get that data to UKHO, and we can turn that into new S102 products really quickly. There's an automated process now that will support the creation of that bathymetric surface. And we have the infrastructure to get that to the vessels really quickly now. And when you bring all of that together, I think now that the days when a pilot had more up-to-date information than the master potentially because his ENC or whatever hadn't been updated with the latest information are quickly going.
Narrowing all the time.
Much. Yeah.
Our final question is somewhat loaded. Is there a chance that the introduction of S100 might be delayed to allow STCW training to catch up? Or is it coming at us?
My best guess is I probably don't think so at this stage, but I wouldn't like to say. I mean, we've not had a digital to digital transformation before. So the idea was that for a period of time, for at least 3 years, there would be an ability for a shipping company to have an S-100 ECDIS alongside their S-57 ECDIS. But then from 1st of Jan 2029, the IMO intend to retire the old performance standard S-57, which would then only leave S-100 ECDIS systems in the marketplace for shipping companies to fit if they needed a new ECDIS system or had to retrofit their vessels. And at the moment, the way that the testing standards developing and the IHO are finalising the last few standards necessary in order to deliver S-100 ECDIS, that period of dual fuel running of systems, I think, is diminishing, and therefore, as well as like the training side, there's also this period where we're possibly losing some of that time frame. So I think there could be a case for extending this a little bit into the future, but I mean, this is IMO. I don't really know what else to say. I don't know.
If I may, I can add a bit on to that. There may be a different angle to look at this. These are all developments to enhance safety of navigation. That means safety of the vessel itself and the pollution prevention there. So therefore, the work what we are doing with the UK hydrographers to produce navigational publications and digital publications along with ENCs for training purposes only. So we don't need to wait for IMO to bring it out. We can, individual companies or individual training providers, individual flag states can make this facility available, at a much cheaper cost to put this training out in place because of this additional data sets coming to enhance the safety of navigation.
It's interesting on the deadlines. There's a couple of more questions come through here. What is the realistic deadline for implementation? 2040 has been thrown around, but I'm hearing that we don't have hard and fast deadlines for this. This is a really iterative process as we get the technology up and running and as we think about the training in that respect.
The only deadline, Kate, would say is, well, it's not even a deadline. It's the date that I talked about, 1st of Jan 2029, comes from the S-100 performance standard. And it's here where they said they would retire the S-57 standard. And that effectively means that you only have the S-100 performance standard from that date forward. So in terms of compliance, if there's only one performance standard, then there's only one system that you can fit from that date. So that's where the date actually comes from. In terms of will all of the ECDIS manufacturers have a system on that date, well, Laura's probably best placed on that.
It depends when the guidance comes out, Tom. And once the final guidance is published, then we'll be ready to go. But it's a bit of a chicken and the egg because, as Tom says, we need to put out these trials to try and get the feedback so that then this spec can be finished. But trying to design something without the spec is... yes, it's complicated, but I think we are getting there. The trials are going well.
The trials are really interesting, and as a quick question is coming here about multiple layers and a relatively small display, potentially creating a tunnel vision effect when you zoom in and you zoom in, rather than being able to see the great big picture. So I guess these trials and what that user interface is going to be critical on fixing these dates.
Yeah. When you say tunnel vision, just having lots of data layers on top?
Given the multiple layers and the relatively small display may create a tunnel visual effect, requiring the navigators to constantly zoom in and zoom out.
I think like Tom sort of touched on that earlier, a lot of these layers will only move one thing. It's not like, I think people have this expectation that you're going to have like a base, because of the current ECDIS and the way the S-57 works, you have a base, a standard, and you layer it up in that way. It's not exactly like that, if you like. It's more that the data comes in and moves one thing on a static display, if you like.
They're far more integrated. And then obviously when you're moving about, things are going to disappear and come back dynamically.
Yeah, it's going to be very, very different.
Yeah.
I think this is a good example of why it's important to get it in front, like examples, like I said in one of my previous answers, out in front of the members, out in front of the crews, because it will allay people's fears and concerns about exactly like that question. When they actually see that thing, what it means to have those 3 layers working is literally just one thing dynamically moving up and down the screen. It may allay those sort of concerns, because it's a right concern, but it's based on S57, I think, is where it's coming from.
The one thing that I've seen in the industry is that nowadays we've got chart table size
Displays.
screen displays.
Yes.
So in terms of them being limited in size, just physical size, I think are really diminishing quickly. One of the issues, I think, is that in the testing standard for ECDIS, when they first published that, was they put minimum screen size in the document, and then everyone built screen sizes to the minimum and didn't actually build them any bigger. And I think that could have been,
This is a real opportunity to totally rethink it and to do what the seafarer wants. So I think the moral of the story is it's coming at us very much. We need to be prepared. We can't wait necessarily for the IMO and STCW to catch up. The moral of the story, I think, Laura, you would say, is contact your manufacturer, see whether your equipment is ready or whether you need to upgrade in any way. Ask them to have a look at it to start allaying these fears, so that seafarers can start having a think about that. So please contact your manufacturers, figure out your hardware needs, better understand how it's going to look like. I would say reach out to John, Loss Prevention at NorthStandard, for any more information on how it's coming or what you need to know, and about the existing ETA app, the ECDIS training app. There's your baseline data. What do your crews know about charts now?
Exactly, that's a free for members product made in conjunction with the UKHO. Like I said, been very popular to date, and we hope there's new changes to that. We're upgrading it as we speak, so watch out for new news on that as well. So it should get even better in the coming months, and hopefully in the future we'll look at what we can do along those lines for S100.
So please keep talking to us. And on that note, with no further questions, I'm going to thank our panellists very much, Tom, Laura, Shahjan and John. Thank you very, very much for joining us. You can get this on catch-up via the Zoom, but I believe it will also be available on NorthStandard's YouTube channel, freely available to share with everybody. Thank you so much for joining us on a very fog on the Tyne Newcastle day. Thank you everybody for joining us online. I really hope this has been very useful for you. Reach out to us at any time, and thank you very much and have a lovely rest of the day.